It's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Brandon Broadwater, who is going to share how he created a life of abundance. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's focus is on relationships. I just spent a weekend at Camp FI recently. 4 days of hanging out with people, sharing life, and learning from others. It's cool when you can find your tribe and you have people who propel you forward. It was fun to meet up with a few of our past guests and also with some of you, the listeners. I really enjoyed the ability to build relationships and look forward to going back. We're going to talk a little bit about relationships during this episode, along with a lot of other topics. Before we do, I want to share a quote from Epictetus. Events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. Things themselves don't hurt or hinder us, nor do other people. How we view these things is another matter. It is our attitudes and reactions that give us trouble. Therefore, even death is no big deal in and of itself. It is our notion of death, our idea that it is terrible, that terrifies us. There's so many different ways to think about death. Scrutinize your notions about death and everything else. Are they really true? Are they doing you any good? Don't dread death or pain. Dread the fear of death or pain. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. I have to tell you, that isn't easy to do. Our views and the lenses we have built are there to protect us. And learning that protection comes at a cost, which is abundance. You have to make a choice and then spend years doing the inner work to make it happen. Brandon's done a lot of that work, and he shares how he did it, as well as some of his personal philosophies. A little bit about him before we chat. Brandon Broadwater is a CEO, speaker, author, educator, entrepreneur, and creator of The Abundance Game, who helps poor and middle class transition to becoming rich and abundant as a human training tool to provide financial education and principle-centered empowerment. Brandon has dedicated his life to helping people discover and put into action the resources, tools, and strategies that create extraordinary results and amazing levels of personal fulfillment. Over the last decade, he has directly impacted the lives of people with his work in financial education, leadership psychology, negotiation, and peak performance. Through involvement with higher laws in the abundance game, many people say their lives have never been the same. In addition, he's invested in over 60 real estate properties. Brandon's a dedicated husband and a father of 5 energetic, bright children. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Brandon Broadwater. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you very much, Rocky. It's great to be here.
So we always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
That's a great question, Rocky. When I was growing up, I didn't know much about money, but what I did notice was my lifestyle changed at one point. And it was at two major turning points when I was growing up. One was a time where I didn't know that there was four different worlds of money: the poor, middle class, rich, and abundant. And I didn't know I was living in the middle class and poor as I grew up, but I was. I remember at an early age, my father passed away and my mother was. And I remember the day she graduated from college, because my mother taught me how to fight in life, to fight for when you're in a tough situation, you keep going, you fight for what you want, you keep your dreams going. And she went back to school and she fought for what she believed in, and she got a degree. And I remember the second she got that degree, we got a brand new car and moved to from a low income area. And we moved into a place that was a pretty nice house, and it was great. I remember the first new car showed up, and for the first time in my life, even though I was very young, I understood that money has the power to change your environment, to change where you spend your time. I got to see my mom more because she wasn't working two jobs going to school, and we weren't on food stamps anymore. Instead, we had this new car, and I got to see my mom every evening. That was my first taste of how money could change things. I was like, wow, maybe this money thing sure makes a difference on how we live our lives.
Did you have specific conversations, or was it more just about that you show up and you keep doing the work and it comes over time?
Well, that was my first remembrance of how money could liberate a person's life or keep somebody stuck. The lessons really kicked in a little while later when I was a teenager, because I had a grandpa that was very wealthy, started with nothing. He actually ended up having millions and millions and millions of dollars, but he started on his own. And when I was a teenager, he stepped into my life and explained to me, Brandon, did you know that there are four worlds of money? And he explained to me through his example, especially through his example, that there was four worlds of money. There was a poor world, there was a middle class world, there was a rich world where people had the things that money could buy, where they understood the rules of money, but it didn't mean they were happy. And then there was also an abundant world. And my grandpa taught me, he said, you have to decide, do you want to be poor and abundant? Do you want to be rich and abundant? Do you want to be middle class or abundant? And I said, well, I want to be rich and abundant. I said, what's the abundant world? He says, that's where people live that have the things that money cannot buy. And I said, like what? He says, where they have happiness. It's where they make a difference in other people's lives. It's where they honor and treasure the people in their lives, so they have strong bonds in their relationships. And I said, well, I want to be rich and abundant. That's what I want. And it wasn't long before I realized how true Grandpa's words were, because when I was a teenager, I fell in love with a girl about 18 years old, and we were both ski instructors at a ski resort. And at the ski resort, at the end of the season, she went home and she flew really far away to Hawaii. And I remember I couldn't go see her because I didn't have the money. And I had the experience to be completely in love and want to go and be with a girl that I was in love with, but I couldn't go and visit her because I didn't have $400. And at that point in my life, I realized, and I made the decision, that money was never going to control my life again, that I was going to figure the money thing out, that I was going to figure out what the rich and abundant were all about, because I wanted a life being rich and abundant, not because I wanted power or control. I just wanted the freedom to go be with the ones I loved. I wanted to go hike in a rainforest when I wanted to, instead of having money tell me what I could do. Does that make sense, Rocky?
Makes total sense to me. It's what we preach here as well. We're going to dig into that in a minute. But before we do, I'd love to ask, how are you teaching your kids about money and abundance?
Now, that is a wonderful question, Rocky. I have 5 kids, and my son literally today said, Dad, check out my bank account on his phone, right? He's 15 years old. My youngest is 8. I have two boys, oldest and youngest, and I have three girls in the middle, right? My oldest boy, 15 years old, says, Dad, look at this. I have $950. I'm $50 away from $1,000 and he's saving up so that he can go on a service mission when he's 18 years old to go and help other people. He's very inspired to go and help and serve other people. And I said, you are awesome. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how many other kids actually have that kind of money at 15 years old? Well, I've taught him. I've taught him about money. If you notice his bank accounts, he has multiple bank accounts opened up. I've taught my kids this, and they have multiple accounts. One of them is 10% to charity. We call it tithing, and they give 10% away to charity. And he has that account. He actively gives. They have one for long-term savings and dreams. And that's the one that he has almost $1,000 towards. And then they have the other account, which is spending and fun. And that's usually the one that gets paid, and he has his own business. He's mowing lawns. He's trimming yards. He does it for multiple houses. And that's what he's been doing now for several years. And it's incredible to see him do such a great job. And the reason why he's willing to work so hard is because I built work ethic into my kids. How did I do that? Well, I'll tell you a quick story. When he was 10 years old, I would have him mow our lawn. And I asked him one day, I said, hey, I need you to go mow the lawn, Carter. And he said, okay. And he goes and just mows it. And I was like, what a great kid. I remember when I was 10 years old, I probably would have given some attitude or maybe complained a little bit. But no, he didn't. He went out and did it. He went out and started mowing the lawn, and I came out a little while later and started doing the trimming with him to help him out. And I said to him, I said, Carter, after he was done, I said, how does a boy your age hear his dad say, go mow the lawn, and you just go out and do it? There's no complaints or anything. You just go for it. I said, do you know how awesome that is? I said, what makes a 10-year-old want to just go out and work? And he said, well, Dad, I know with you, I can do it the hard way or the easy way. And I'm going to mow the lawn either way. So I might as well just get out there and do it because I'm going to have to do it either way. And one of the things that he explained to me was that he's like, Dad, I know that if you ask me to go out and mow the lawn, that I'm not going to be able to play with my friends until I mow the lawn. I'm not going to have any spending money until I mow the lawn. I don't get any screens or Xbox or iPhones to play with until I mow the lawn. And so that's why I just go and get it done. And now I can go play. And so as a parent, I don't use my voice to motivate. I instead use my creativity, and I can control the environment. So to motivate my kids to have good work ethic, this comes before the money. I simply said, listen, mow the lawn when you want, or do the dishes when you want, or sweep the floor when you want, or take out the trash when you want. But until you get that done, you don't get friends, screens, and you don't get the privileges of life. And so what it's done is it's taught them, and sometimes they'd wait around for 4 hours or 5 or 6 or 7. And finally they're like, Dad, I'm so bored. What should I do? I'm like, just get your jobs done and the whole world opens up to you. And from a very young age, I started that when kids were 5 years old, they learned a work ethic. So by the time he was 10, I could simply ask him to go mow the lawn, which was, we live in a desert. It's 100 degrees outside. We have a half-acre lot. He's sweating out there for an hour, but he'll go do it because I started that training when they were 5 and 6 years old. Do you want to watch your little cartoon show? Great. All you got to do is take out the trash. Very simple things at that age, but now they have a great work ethic.
And that's impressive. We used very much the same system for them as far as saving, spending, and giving away. I struggled a bit with the building the work ethic as much. And that sounds like a great way to do it. You just say, if you want to have all the privileges in life, get your work done, and then you can have it. And you don't have to have the arguments. And as you build those systems and you implement them, it makes life much easier. And your kids learn a much, much bigger lesson, right? Because they learn, get the work done, and then I can go have all the fun that I want to. Plus, I'll have the money.
Absolutely.
Let's dig into this abundance. Like, what does it really mean? And how do we create abundance in our life?
So what does abundance mean? First of all, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with the context, with the general idea. And I have a visual on my website at healththinkglobal.com. And then I want you click on the greatness tab. and it's HealthSync, SYNC, healthsyncglobal.com. And then once you get there to the homepage, just click greatness. And on the greatness page, you're going to see a quadrant, which is a plus sign with some letters in it. And you'll see these letters on the top represent poor, bottom left is middle class, top right is rich, and the bottom right is abundant. So poor, middle class, rich, and abundant. These are the four worlds that my grandpa talked to me about. The left-hand side of this quadrant is a very different experience on planet Earth compared to the right-hand side of the quadrant. And when we talk about what is an abundant life, it's the things that money cannot buy. See, we can be rich and have the things that money can buy, but we can also be abundant and have the things that money cannot buy. And when we talk about happiness, a lot of times people overlook that happiness is not something you can go and get. The old ancient masters understood and they taught in the parables of how we can achieve happiness. And the way that we can do it is not by going out and getting, it's by giving. It's a paradox. It's a paradox. So the people who are abundant understand that to be fulfilled, we need to unfill, or in other words, serve or give, and we need to give of ourselves in order to fill ourselves up. And it seems counterproductive. It seems counterintuitive, but that's the whole point, is the ancient masters understood that these higher laws of how the universe works, they're based on a paradox. And if we want to have an abundant life, we have to understand that we will never reach our potential until we help somebody else reach their potential. It's a paradox. And until we have the desires to uplift and serve somebody else and to help them get to their next step in life, to genuinely reach out to them and serve them, we will never be filled. And in fact, if we don't take the time to serve, then people get lost and they think, well, I've done everything right, but I'm not happy. Well, yeah, that's because you're good. You're not great. Happiness is for great people, not for good people. Good people are very honorable and they do a lot of good things in the world, but they're not happy. And the good people of the world are stuck in this honorableism where they do live a good life, but they hit a wall wondering, where did I go amiss in my life? And the reason they miss the target in life is it's not because they've done anything necessarily wrong. It's not because they've done anything wrong. It's because they've left things undone. And it's the unsung songs of serving that were unfulfilled or that they're choosing not to fulfill on a daily basis. And it's not like you missed your boat. Every single day we have multiple opportunities to get outside ourselves. For example, right in this very second, in the middle of this podcast, we could stop the podcast and you can take 30 seconds to write a text or an email that shows thanks and gratitude to somebody who made a difference in your life and say, hey, you might not know this, but you helped me believe in me many years ago or last week or last year or the last decade. Just writing an email or a text like that of graciousness and appreciation can very much serve somebody else. So it's not like we have to wait around for a big opportunity to come to make a difference. We can create that opportunity because we have that capacity to create that opportunity to serve and make a difference in other people's lives. We can't wait around for this to come. People who are great create great opportunities every single day. They don't wait for opportunities. And that's the difference between living a life that's abundant versus living a life that is just good or honorable.
And so there's a couple of points there. Number one, happiness comes along the journey. It's not a destination, so you don't have to wait for it. It's not a when X happens, then I can finally be happy, or when I have money, I can be happy. And you actually gave an example of how you can give without spending money, because it costs you nothing to say thank you to someone else or to lift them up or prop them up. And then you're talking about kind of that scarcity mindset where it is not a fixed piece of the pie. You can give and the pie grows. And the more you give, the more you can receive. And thank you for sharing an example of how to do that without even having literally 30 seconds of your time. And at the end of the day, it doesn't even cost anything to do it, essentially, to send the text, to send the thank you. And as you're serving and doing that and helping others, then they in turn will most likely help you back. But it's not a scorekeeping system too. And I think sometimes people get into a scorekeeping where, oh, I helped this one, and no one's helping me back. And again, that gets back into the wrong mindset, right?
That's right. My grandpa taught me when he started to teach me that there's more going on in life, he taught me that there's a domino effect. And when we serve one person, it's not necessarily that one person might serve us back. That might be true. He said, and this is the way he explained it to me when I was 14 years old. He said, Brandon, when you do something nice to somebody, you send a wave, as if it's like a set of dominoes, a domino effect that goes through the universe. And it goes and touches many people's lives in one way or another. And the universe knows who you are. And at one point or another, as you give, it will come back to you. But the dominoes never start. And this domino effect never begins unless you serve with real intent, which means if you're going to do something nice for somebody, just do it to be nice. If you're going to give 10% to charity, do it just to give. Don't give to get. He says, because if you give to get, then the domino never got pushed in the first place. He says it takes a pure heart to engage the magic of life. So if you're going to give, just give. And I said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, you're a teenager right now. You're 14 years old. You usually think about yourself all day, but that's okay. You're asking some good questions. I'll just tell you, try not to think about yourself all day because some adults don't ever figure this out. Just go, when you're going to go do something nice, just do it to give. Don't expect anything back, and then you'll get something back. But don't expect it from the person. The universe will take care of you. And he opened my eyes to this world. You asked me, what is an abundant life? An abundant life isn't just happiness. It's being engaged with people's lives. It's also being engaged with this amazing universe that is alive and well if we will just have a little bit of faith to step in to see what life has to offer, which means step into unknown opportunities. Believe when others doubt. For goodness sakes, I've had the opportunity to train people in peak performance for over a decade. And in 22 countries, I've had the opportunity to have my message go around to help people with peak performance. And there is one thing that does not help people do good in their lives or to have the life they desire. And there's one thing that holds people back from their dreams. It holds them back from what their businesses are capable of. It kills them all over in their lives. And there's one thing that does it, and it's called doubt. Anytime I've met a person who leads with doubt, they miss out on so many opportunities. It's ridiculous. And they don't realize that they are the cause of their own reality. They are the cause of their own results. And it's as if their doubt is going to secure them less pain in life. But in the end, it is the exact thing that creates the stagnant results in their lives. We have to keep moving. The people who believe, and I'm not saying ignorantly, we can be smart about it, but the people who have a little bit of faith, who are willing to give people a chance or a second chance or a third chance instead of holding back in life. I've never met anybody who leads with doubt that has what they really want.
And that's very true. Where did your grandfather learn all this wisdom from? Do you know?
I do. I asked him that once I was about 18 or 19 years old. And he says that he learned it when he was very young. And he started studying about the ancient American Indians and started learning about them in a Christian religion that he's a part of today. And he actually learned a bunch of these principles by being a member of that Christian organization called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's where my grandpa learned all about these higher laws. I didn't grow up in that situation, so what he was doing was translating it into a form and words so I could hear it for what it was.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
What other wisdom did he share with you?
Well, he taught me so much. My grandpa taught me about the reality that, it depends. I can talk about business. I can talk about spiritual stuff. What category would you like to know about, Rocky?
Let's start with business, and then if we have time, we'll get back to the spiritual.
Okay, perfect. He taught me that in life, that you either have to figure the money thing out or money's going to drive you. And he taught me about that. And it led me on a journey to go learn from millionaires, other millionaires. And it sent me on a journey pondering deeply when I was a teenager of what I wanted to do with my life. And as I started to see that business owners and entrepreneurs were the ones who were able to literally make 20 years of middle class income, and they could do it in 2 months or 2 years. They could literally do that because businesses had the ability to make money so much faster. But he also told me, he says, look, if you're going to even go down this route, you have to be able to manage risk, which means you're going to step into life not knowing how things are going to work out. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you can go get a job somewhere and you know you'll get paid in 2 weeks. You might not know exactly where you're going to work or if the company is going to keep you, or you might want to apply to work at different places as you go through your life. He said, but when you go into business, you have the ability to make 20 years of income in 2 months. And he was right. I mean, I've done that multiple times. I remember the very first time I made $75,000 in a day. And what it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was possible, because I know what it was like. I worked at a grocery store when I was a teenager. I worked at a construction site building residential homes and framing houses and cutting the wood and using nail guns and building homes. I mean, I know what it's like to work for, $5 an hour, $10 an hour, $15 an hour. I know what it's like to work for $50 an hour, but I also know what it's like to make 75 grand in a day. And as my grandpa started to teach me about how the rich look at the world, the rich look at money and the way of making money very differently than the poor middle class. The poor middle class look at money and they say, well, if I want more money, I'm going to go get a job, get a second job, or I'm going to go back to school. The rich, if they want to make more money, they don't think about going back to school, and that's not their solution. And they definitely don't think about going and getting a second job. What they think about is, how can I create more value in people's lives and monetize it? So do I have a product or an idea or a service? And if I do, how do I show the world the value of this incredible product or service? And the really good entrepreneurs, the really good business owners will start a business for a mission. They'll do it to make a difference in people's lives. They'll build products and services to impact people's lives. And they'll use a business vehicle to become a pillar of strength in people's lives. And those are the ones who make the most money. Those are the ones who end up doing really well, because people can now capture the vision on what the products not only do, but the vision of what the company is doing, and they want to be a part of it. And that's one of the things that I've learned in business about what the truly rich and abundant do. The best business owners, they're driven by mission, not cash. I mean, any business can make money, and there's businesses that can lose money, but the businesses that are really admirable are the ones that have a mission to serve and make a difference in people's lives. My grandpa also taught me that 9 out of 10 businesses fail. So be ready to fail 9 times in order to have the 10th success. I said, are you serious? He says, it doesn't mean you're going to have to fail 9 times, but be willing to fail 9 times to get to that 10th one. I said, okay, so the idea is to fail faster. And he says, yes and no. He says, you got to be willing to fail, but try to get it right the first time. And I said, well, how do I get it right the first time? He said, there's 2 ways to get into business. You can either, 1, create your own business. And even if you get it right, it takes years of learning curve. You got to learn about culture and vision and products and manufacturing. You got to learn about, core values, and you got to learn about how to run meetings effectively and how to motivate people, and right. Or so you can create a business. That's one of the 2 options. Or you can join a business. He said, if you join a business and you find a business that resonates with you, that is doing something great, then you can join, and that'll take off 10 years of the learning curve, because most of the effort, most of the business is already done. Now you just got to do the work. He says, Brandon, I can't get you out of that. You got to do the work. And that's true for everybody. And that's one of the reasons why I built HealthSync Global, is to be able to provide people a business and have a rich and abundant business vehicle so they don't have to go do it on their own. I taught entrepreneurs for over a decade. And in one form or another, I've spent the last 20 years helping people to reach peak performance. And it's true. I've trained people on how to run businesses and how to get started. And I know what it takes. I've been there. People paid me big dollars to do that. And I've very much appreciated the opportunity to provide a way for them to have success. But at one point or another, I said, well, why am I taking people through this get started business path when I could give them a business and shave off 10 years of effort and they could get results that much faster? So people have a choice. They can start a business and do it all yourself and build your own teams, or you can join a business.
Question: why do most businesses fail? What have you seen?
That's a great question. I think that there's a couple reasons why they fail, and there could be a lot of things. But I think that leadership is one of the reasons why. I think that mindset is probably the biggest driver. If you look at that prosperity quadrant on that greatness tab, you're going to see that the left-hand side of the quadrant, it represents the poor middle class. This isn't just how much money is in your bank account or where you derive your income from. The prosperity quadrant represents your mindset. It could represent a marriage. You could be in a marriage and have a bad attitude. You'd be in the poor quadrant. You could settle and just give up and give in and just go with the flow, but there's no love. That would be mediocre or middle class. You could be rich where you have great technique but no heart, or you could be abundant where there's love and a bond and graciousness and gratitude for one another. So this prosperity quadrant that's on the greatness tab, this represents the 4 different worlds. So your question, Rocky, why do businesses fail? It's because a person with a middle class mindset is trying to run a rich business, and they're called solopreneurs. And there's no way that a person with a solopreneur middle class mindset is going to have great success in business simply because of the mindset where they're coming from. We got this mindset from school, is don't cooperate. That's called cheating. No, in the business world, cooperation is what makes things possible. You got to collaborate. You got to be transparent with your weaknesses. You got to be willing to have tough conversations. But if you approach business with a middle class mindset, you're dead, because you're going to try to be the answer to everybody's problems. You're going to try to run everything on your own. And even if you have 5 to 10 employees, you're going to become a bottleneck, which is dysfunctional in a business, because a middle class solopreneur is unwilling to let go of control. So to answer your question, and if there's somebody listening right now that really wants to get a powerful lesson, I want you to write this down. Your success in business is directly proportional to your ability to let go of control. I'll say it again. Your success is directly proportional to your ability to let go of control. What does that mean? If you're unwilling to delegate and get out of the way of the business and empower others to be their best, and if you don't know how to do that, you're in the way. And if everything has to go through you, you're the bottleneck. You're going to slow it down. You're going to be the reason why the business doesn't grow. A solopreneur mindset cannot grow an incredible, rich, and abundant business. You got to work with teams. And when a person finally understands this, and when I finally understood this, I could get out of my own way.
And that's a big part of it. We have different real estate businesses, and that's the biggest one. When we flip houses, I get out of the way. I'm like, there's the house. You know what to do. Go make choices. Call me when there's a problem. And literally, I spend very little time. I give them total control to get the work done. And it's wonderful. It works really, really well. You also mentioned another thing, which was managing risk. What did you mean by managing risk, and how do you do that?
That's a great question. Managing risk means that we're smart. We think about things, we think it through in our minds, and we make our best decision. But managing risk also means that at one point or another, we take a leap of faith. When I bought my second airplane, this is an airplane that was a fast, high performance airplane, and it was meant for business travel. It was great. And I'm flying with my partner who I bought the plane with. And as we're flying along, we went from St. George to Half Moon Bay in San Francisco. This is an airport runway on the beach on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge out in California on the coast. And you literally come down the coast over the beach and you land on the runway. And they're famous for having the $100 hamburger. And I went in there and I said, so where's the $100 hamburger? They're only $20. And they said, oh yeah, the $100. The reason we call it $100 is because the pilots have to pay for fuel. It's your airplane costs, which by the way are a lot more than $80. But we fly out there, and I remember going to this nice restaurant, and this is the first day we owned our plane. We went to, and we flew by the Golden Gate Bridge. We flew past Yosemite National Park, and I live just north of Las Vegas in a beautiful community called St. George. And as we're flying back to this Red Rock country, we're over Yosemite, and we're flying in this amazing airplane that is a glass cockpit, has more technology than most airlines up in the air. And I looked at my partner, who I bought the plane with, and I said to him, you know, today's a big day. It's a milestone in our lives. I said, this is your first airplane, my second airplane, and not a lot of people get to buy an airplane and fly it wherever they want. And I said to him, why you and me? Why do you think you and me get an airplane? And what about all our friends and those other great people that also want one? Why us? We're not special. I said, and he said to me, you're right, Brandon, we're not special. I said, we know that, but other people that look at us might think differently, but we know that we're just ordinary individuals. There's nothing different about us except for one or two things. And I said this to my partner. I said, you make $50 million a year doing what you're doing in motorsports. He has a couple motorsports companies. I said, how in the world why did you and me get an airplane? And he thought about it. And I thought about it as we're sitting there flying in silence. And he looked over at me and said, Brandon, I know why. This is why we get an airplane and some other people don't. I said, why? He said, because you and I were willing to take risks that other people were not willing to take. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, think about it. When we got started in business, we put cash on the line. We were willing to lose in order to win. And other people could not leave their comfort zones. And because of that, they're stuck with the output of what those decisions made. So how do you manage risk? Get outside your comfort zone, but do so by not doing it alone. And you don't just take some big leap of faith and say, all right, I quit my job today and I'm going for it. No, that could be a little reckless. Instead, hang out with people who are rich and abundant. Get proximity with those who have success so that you can learn and understand their way of thinking and how they see the world and how they make their decisions. If you want to manage risk and lower the risk, then hang out with people who've had success. But be careful who you hang out with, because being rich is not qualification enough for me. They need to be both rich and abundant. I want to know that they have good relationships. I want to know that they have heart, which means not just a heart for success. They have heart to take good care of people. And if you take advice from somebody who's just rich and just has money, you might get their results and everything that goes with it, which means they might have left a pattern of destroyed relationships along in their path. I don't want that result. I want the result of rich and abundant. So whenever I take people's advice, I do my best to make sure that their kids have a light and a twinkle in their eyes of happiness. I'm not looking for perfection, but I'm looking for general happiness. Are they humble and teachable, or do they have to be right? Are they open to new ideas? Are they complaining about life or excited about life? Do they love life? Do they talk about bigger things than money, or do they just talk about money? So to manage risk, to answer your question, we need to have a little bit of faith. We've got to be willing to get outside our comfort zones. And to manage risk, we have to spend time with those who have success, but they've got to be rich and abundant, not just rich.
And that makes a lot of sense because you are the average of the people that you surround yourself with. And so if you don't surround yourself with people who are abundant, then it's hard to become abundant. You end up chasing money. And at the end of the day, that's not going to make you happy if that's all you're doing. So you mentioned something earlier, and I think this is a big thing that people struggle with, and that's doubt. How do we overcome the doubt, the voices in our head that prevent us from success and abundance?
That's a great question. What are the things that can help us to overcome doubt that prevent us from success and abundance? That's your question, right, Rocky?
Yes.
I love it. Because the question, what are the things that hold us back from being success and abundance, or what I've mentioned, rich and abundant, we're talking the same thing. What does it take to become rich and abundant? Well, we do have to overcome our doubts. And there are 3 specific elements that a person needs to become rich and abundant. And if you have all 3, not just 2, there's 3 elements that are going to help us to successfully become rich and abundant. And these 3 things will not only make you rich and abundant, they'll also help us to achieve greatness. And it's a transition to greatness that occurs that helps us to become rich and abundant. And yes, we have to overcome our doubts. One of them is that, and this is one of the reasons I feel the responsibility, and I had to start the company HealthSync Global, because I have an overcome your doubt system. I don't call it that, but that's exactly what it does. You see, in the last 20 years, in one form or another, I've helped people to win from within. I had a company called Master Your Power Within, and I would train and teach people on how to achieve peak performance. That win from within system I've taken, and I've taken 20 years of experience and training in 22 countries, and I've brought it down to a 16-minute audio that you listen to each morning, and it's called Zona. Zona is one of our registered trademarks, and it stands for Zona, getting into the zone of success. It's getting into the zone of success. Let me explain why this is so important. In our process of overcoming doubts, we will get into the zone of success. We cannot be in the zone of success if we are doubting or leading with doubt. As we get into the zone of success, the whole world opens up to us. Think about it. The times in our lives where we've made decisions that are not helpful, that didn't help our lives, it's because we were not in the zone. In fact, we were in the opposite. We were in a bad mood or a poor mood or in a doubting mood, right? Think about how much different our lives would be today if we were in the zone consistently every day. And think about what is it going to look like in the next 5 years of our lives if we can consistently get our butts into the zone every single day. That's why I designed Zona. Zona is a win from within system that helps us to remember who we are, helps us to overcome doubt, but it's a lot bigger than that. Instead of just overcoming doubt, you're going to find yourself in the zone. I'm talking about a peak performance mindset when we are at our best. And Zona gets us there. Zona is incredible. In fact, I have 6 minutes, a small taste of Zona available for you guys, and I'll give it to you at the end of this podcast. I'll give you a link to it, and I'll give you, it's like 30% of Zona, so it's only a small portion of it, but I'll give it to you away for free today, and it'll help you overcome doubts. How do you do it? You got to have a daily system to overcome your doubts. We are human beings. We forget. We forget who we are sometimes. We forget why we're doing what we're doing. We forget why we started a business. We forget why we married the person that we love. We forget why we're raising kids. If we don't have a system to remember, then we will forget. It's the nature of who we are. Our minds are not perfect. Our mortal frames are exactly that. They're mortal. We need to have immortal, or should I say, universal principles that are always true, no matter what your mood is, no matter whether it's a good day or bad day. We have to have these universal principles to guide our lives. Zona is embedded with universal principles that will light us up every single day. It'll help us to get out of doubt and into the zone so we can have success. Some of the technology that's built into it has taken me 20 years to put into this 16-minute audio. Some of the technology is asking the right questions. Is it the same audio recording every day? People have asked me. I said, yes, it's the same audio, but it's never the same experience because the audio is a series of questions for part of it. And the answers to the questions always change. For example, if you ask the question, what are 2 things that I can accomplish before 10 a.m.? That's one of the questions we ask. Do you know how much technology is built into that question? You ask me, Rocky, how can we overcome doubt? We overcome doubt by having a sense of accomplishment each day. What's the best way to get a sense of accomplishment? Well, if you study all the Franklin Covey or planning or efficient leadership advanced books of the world on how to manage your time each day, you know what? When it all comes down to it, if you and I can accomplish 2 of the most important things that we have to get done by 10 a.m. each morning, our self-confidence is going to explode. And if we have more self-confidence, it will compound on ourselves each day. By asking the question in Zona, what are 2 things I can accomplish before 10 a.m.? By just asking the question, it gets our minds set on 2 things we can accomplish by 10 a.m. And the fact that we're asking the right questions, 90% of the battle is already won because a person's life is determined by the quality of questions they ask themselves. But if we don't know the right questions, or we inadvertently are unconsciously asking the wrong questions, our lives will spin out and we won't know why. Zona will get us into the zone of success by several different things, but one of the things in the technology is asking perfectly refined questions that have taken decades to get just right. It's not what are 3 things can I do before 10 a.m. It's not what are 3 things before 11 a.m. It's not what's 1 thing I can do before 9 a.m. It's what are 2 things I can do before 10 a.m. It's designed specifically because we've tested and tried and true for trial and error in many people's lives. We figured out exactly what works the most, that has the best outcome, that helps us to have success. And that's just 10 seconds. One question in the 16 minutes of Zona, and is one example of how amazingly powerful it can be. And if that's all we did, we'd accomplish and feel so much better about each day of our lives. We wouldn't finish our days with it. I did everything but what I really needed to do.
We'll be back with Brandon in a moment. What prevents you from doing what you need to do? Do you procrastinate or focus on things that are not important to your success? Have you thought through what it is that you need? As Brandon mentioned, it's a lot about mindset. As a business owner, you need to focus on cash flow and profit. Make sure you're asking the right questions to ensure profitability. That will allow you to become abundant. That is what I help people do. Focus on what's important and help with the accountability and planning to ensure that it happens. Are you ready to have someone on your side whose goal is your success? Reach out and let's schedule a short call to see if we're a good fit for coaching. It's Rocky@richersoul.com. Now, let's get back to the amazing conversation with Brandon. And it's true. I mean, if you can live every day of your life and accomplish 2 things you need to get done, you're probably way ahead of most people, because most people are stuck doing things that are counterproductive or don't push them forward, and then they wonder why they didn't get done what they were supposed to get done. So you mentioned something else. You said proximity to people. And I think this is one, especially people starting out, they're like, how do I get proximity to these abundant people? How am I going to find them and hang out with them?
That's a great question. You can start by listening to podcasts like this. These podcasts open our minds. But here's one of the secrets that I've learned. There's so much information these days that you could spend a lifetime and not even get through 1% of all the information that's out there. We live in a time where people are ever learning, but never coming to a knowledge of the truth and never getting the results they want. So when I say start by listening to podcasts, yes, it starts there, yes. But one of the things that I've done is when you find a teacher or a person that resonates with you, when you feel that this is a person that might teach you a lot, stick with them. Don't go bouncing around and go to 20 different sources, or you're going to be going 20 different directions. And I can tell you right now, one of the reasons I've been able to create 3 multi-million-dollar companies, and Helsing Global is the 4th one. The reason I've been able to do that is because I've chosen 1 or 2 sources of truth, 1 or 2 sources of inspiration, and I go deep. I stick with it, and I keep going. Sure, I'll listen a little here and there to other stuff, but I'm very loyal to the pure sources of inspiration, and I go deep. We can go around and take a little taste of a lot of different things in life. That's great to some degree. But if we don't go deep and stick with 1 or 2 sources of inspiration, then we're just going to bounce around and we'll be a drifter. The sources that I've chosen to stick with are sources that are principle-based, that teach principles that work no matter what country I'm from, no matter what belief system I have. The principles are tried and true, and they work every time. And that's what happens with Zona. It's embedded with universal principles. It's not a Brandon Broadwater program, even though I created it. The reason why it gets people so many results is because it's based on principles. And the principles are where the power's at in Zona and in the program. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess it kind of takes us back to that fork we came into the road, which was to go back and talk about what your grandfather talked about from the spirituality side that he taught you.
Absolutely. Do you mind asking me a specific question about it? Because I could go to a lot of different places with that.
I'll leave it open. Whatever you think is most important.
Well, I think that my grandpa opened my eyes to that the universe is real. And back in those days, he wouldn't say God because I had a chip on my shoulder towards that word. And I don't today at all. But my grandpa, he was able to bridge the gap of somebody that was a little cynical, myself, and had a lot of chips on my shoulders and judgments towards others. And I thought people were judging me, but I found out as I grew older that I was the one judging them. And he taught me that the universe is alive and well. And as you step forward in life with faith, the stepping stones will appear. And he taught me that the people who live a life of greatness are those who lead with faith. He also taught me that blind faith doesn't exist in a healthy culture. Because I used to think that people who were spiritual or religious were a bunch of blind sheep. And that was when I was 15 years old. I'm 42 years old now. I think very differently. The truth is that faith, my grandpa taught me this as well, that faith really never is blind faith because we always have evidence. For example, anybody listening today, and I'm talking about to have a little faith in life, see what life has to offer, step into the unknown. Don't be dumb about it. Do a little research and step into it. You don't just do it. You just got evidence. I mean, you've heard my life. You've heard how I've been able to make millions. You've heard how we've influenced millions. I shouldn't say millions. We've influenced thousands of people's lives in 22 countries. And when I say that, I don't keep saying it to brush my own feathers or give myself a merit badge. What I'm saying is that a powerful message goes really far around the planet. And one of the things my grandpa taught me was that the universe knows who you are. I've come to know since then that my grandpa was talking about God. He was talking about my heavenly father. He was talking about my spiritual father. And he was teaching me back then that he says, you know, your spiritual father knows who you are. But he didn't use that language. He says the universe knows who you are. And go out there, and if you want to have a relationship with the universe, there's two things you got to do. One, you got to have faith. You've got to have faith. And the second thing you need to do is you've got to live a principle-centered life. You cannot experience what this world has to offer if we have secret appetites in the closet. We cannot experience what life has to offer if we're listening to our, what I call your internal hyena, our excuse maker, the part of ourselves that disregards integrity, the part of ourselves that's driven by our appetites. It's the selfish part of ourselves. It's the part of ourselves that wants to be right. But we also have another part within us that I would say is represented by a lion. And this lion inside is our spiritual component that is courageous, believes, doesn't doubt, says they're sorry first. And this battle we have within, between this lion and hyena, between the spirit and the flesh, this battle within is very real. And my grandpa taught me that if we listen to our lions within, our courageous part, and our lions will always want to live and do what's right. The hyena wants to be right. The lion wants to do what's right. And instead of being politically correct mentally, because I can be right in a conversation with my wife, I've been married 18 years and I know what it's like to be right, but I also know what it's like to be wrong even though I'm right. Because if I am offending her in the process of, hey, Brandon, you're late. No, I'm not. I told you I was going to be home at this time. The fact that I didn't respond to her heart and I was not sensitive to her needs, I could be right and still be wrong at the same time. And so my grandpa was teaching me about this, that you could be intellectually right, but your heart might not be in the right place where you're approaching things like a lion. So my point here is that spiritually, my grandpa taught me that the universe knows who we are. The universe knows us by name. He says, but you won't know that, Brandon, until you step into it. And the way that you have a relationship with deity is you live a principle-centered life and you step into life with some faith and watch. He says the universe, you'll step into the unknown and boom, a stepping stone will appear. And no matter how hard your logical mind wants to figure everything out, you want to know what the next step is and you want to know how it's all going to work out, your logical mind does not get the privilege. He said, there's something about faith where if you step into life, the stepping stone will show up. And if you step another step, the stepping stone will show up. I used to be close friends with Robert Kiyosaki. I haven't seen him for over a decade now. But at one season of my life, I was friends with him and I ended up doing some book studies with him and I knew him by name. I'd eat lunches with him and go to restaurants with him. And Robert Kiyosaki wrote the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He's written 15 New York Times bestselling books. And one of the things that, Robert and I, we don't have the same philosophy with everything. But one thing we do know, one thing that I did learn from him was how he created the Rich Dad Company. And interestingly enough, Robert's a money guy. Like he's very much all about money to a great degree. And I said to him, how in the world did you create a company that's in 50 countries around the world and more? He said, well, I got ramped up on the inside and I stepped into it. I said, what do you mean by that? He says, I do the same thing today. I speak on stages all around the world. Before I go on stage, I get ramped up on the inside and I step into it and see what life has to offer. And I said, are you talking about faith, a little bit of faith? And Robert said, that's how the universe works, Brandon. You see, he was saying the same thing as my grandpa, is that in order to engage the pendulums of the universe, we have got to step into things by believing. And what my grandpa reassured me of is that you're not alone. You're not alone. And for goodness sakes, my grandpa taught me, get on your knees and ask for help. Don't be too prideful to not ask for help. And for goodness sakes, my grandpa taught me, have a little thanks. At the end of each day, ask yourself the question, what are two things the universe has done to make my life even better? At least recognize that the universe is alive and well. But if we don't ask the right questions, we're not going to recognize it. The alternative is you walk the path of life alone.
And that's very true. We do have to ask ourselves the questions and overcome ourselves. And you made a comment there about having a lot of chips on your shoulder. How did you get rid of them?
That's a great question. I think that there's got to be some brutal honesty with ourselves. It's so easy to point the finger at somebody else and not take responsibility. There's a lot of times in life that we're justified. We are 100% justified in a bond injury, that I call it, that, we got our feelings hurt, or somebody broke our trust, or somebody did something that was possibly not right or even abusive. We can have good freaking reasons to have a chip on our shoulder. But in the end, it's not about being right. I had the opportunity to, in some of my trainings, to do a training called Relationship Mastery. And I'd pull couples up on stage that wanted to heal their marriages. And some of them, it was their last ditch effort. They're like, all right, let's go to this Relationship Mastery seminar. If it doesn't work, we're divorced. And I do these live interventions on stage. And you'd think it was a gutsy move for me to do it. But in reality, it wasn't, because the power of truth and the power of these principles is real. So how do you get rid of a chip on your shoulder? Part of healing I believe underneath the chip on the shoulder, there's a bond injury. And that's why I bring up relationships. If somebody has a chip on their shoulder like I did, it's because I had parents or friends that said that they couldn't play with me because I swore. Because when I was young, I didn't know swearing would offend people. I don't swear today. But I did back then. But I didn't know I was offending people. So I took it real personal, and I, blamed religion, but it wasn't about that. It was about somebody that they were judgmental towards me, but I blame them. Anyways, how do you get rid of a chip on your shoulder? I think there's brutal honesty of taking responsibility for, our responsibility is that we need to forgive. And if we choose not to, then we end up with a toxicity. I remember a funny story my father-in-law, my wife's dad, told literally 2 weeks ago. We're driving in the car, and he was telling this story about his friend who's in his late 60s, who's still mad at a kid from 5th grade. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, this kid said, can I borrow 20 or a nickel? And he said, sure, I'll pay you back tomorrow. And the kid in 5th grade didn't pay him back the next day. And then he got a chip on his shoulder about it. And then the week later, he said, hey, I want my nickel. He says, yeah, I'll give it to you. And after asking him about 5 times to get his nickel back, the kid's like, yeah, I kept blowing it off. And he said, I'll get it tomorrow. I promise, I just am really forgetting. And maybe the kid really did forget. But what happened was he gave him a nickel and he couldn't let it go. And he said later on in life, he saw him in his 40s. And he saw the kid that he gave a nickel to, and he had that same emotion inside of him. He was so upset that he never got his nickel back. And he's in his 40s saying, this is ridiculous, but he still had a chip on his shoulder. And the reason why this came up is because now they're in their late 60s. And he asked the same question to my father-in-law. I still have hard feelings to the guy. How can I forgive him? It's just a nickel. And he said, why? And he said, because I saw him. Literally, this happened in the last 30 days. They're both in their 60s now. And he said, why didn't you ever pay me for that nickel? If you just pay me the nickel, I can forgive you. And he said, I have never remembered why you keep bringing this up through all the years. I never remembered the nickel. So the kid who received the nickel moved on. He totally forgot about it. It's unaffected to it. He's been unaffected by his life. He was a kid, right? He doesn't remember. But this other guy, to this day, is still struggling with forgiving him because he has a chip on his shoulder. Who is the loser? Who's the loser in the end? Is it the kid who didn't pay back the nickel, or the kid, or the guy who still holds resentment and a chip on his shoulder? And I think a lot of times what happens is people don't realize that they create their own toxicity. So how do you get rid of a chip on your shoulder? I think that there needs to be a lot of understanding, which is the beginning of forgiveness. How do you understand somebody that's hurt you? How do you understand somebody that's abused you? Well, you can understand the power of the hyena. You can understand the power of selfishness. Maybe they were miserable. Maybe they were hurting. Maybe they were desperate. Maybe they were abused. Maybe God, or maybe the universe, knew that if you went through this pain, you would serve others. and that you'd have more empathy. Maybe it was a good thing. So as I've looked back on the challenges and trauma in my life, Rocky, what I've done is I found the lesson. And that's my secret to overcoming chips on my shoulder, is I get the lesson. And it's very personal between me and the universe. I ask the universe, what's my lesson? What's my lesson in this? I have a chip on my shoulder. What's my lesson? And when I get the lesson, I'm very close, if not completing the finish line of letting go of that chip on my shoulder. Sometimes the lesson is be careful. Sometimes the lesson is speed up. Sometimes it's slow down. Sometimes the lesson is I just need to forgive. Sometimes the lesson is to have a lot of empathy for other people, even though what they did was not right.
You ask a lot of great questions of yourself.
I'll mention one more thing, Rocky. In the midst of contentious moments, my wife and I haven't had a perfect marriage, but in the midst of when there's some heat or some contention, what solves it the fastest is when I go to this mindset. I ask myself, I say this to myself, my wife is my greatest teacher. What is she teaching me right now? And I put on the lesson hat. What lesson is there for me right now? And it's the fastest way out of problems in life. And she even told me one day, she says, Brandon, you are so hard to be mad at. I said, what are you talking about? She says, because anytime I get upset, you're so quick to get the lesson that you've learned the lesson and you're ready to go. And she's like, I still kind of want to be mad. I said, do you want me to fake it for a while or what? She's like, oh, you're doing it again. You're being teachable.
And that is awesome. What's one action step people can take this week to move forward?
I'd start with this. Keep going and don't doubt. And that's more of a universal thing. Number two, I would say number one, if you want one action step, is see where this goes. If I've shared anything today that is meaningful to you, the action step is to dig deeper. Am I meant to be a person in your life that's just a pop-up listen to for 5 minutes? Do you want to know what's behind all this? Do you want more? Do you want more of the things I've talked about? Then dig a little deeper. How do you do that? You can join our movement to become rich and abundant. I created the reason I built Health Think Global is so people can become rich and abundant. I've invested millions of dollars. I have team members that have taken companies from $0 to $1 billion of annual revenue on my team right now. And if you want to have financial success, you can either start a business or you can join one. We have a business model. We are a direct sales company. I love direct sales. When it's done right, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. The synergy, the success stories are incredible. We have found a classy approach to share with other people. And if I was going to say what's an action step is if you love or if you resonate with some of the things I've talked about today, don't interpret what I'm saying right now as a sales pitch, because maybe I'm on a mission. Maybe I'm on a mission that's awesome. Maybe the mission is real. Maybe the mission to help people become rich and abundant, it really is the goal. Maybe it's not a cash grab. It's not. We're on a mission. And I have provided inside Health Think Global the 3 elements needed to become rich and abundant. Number one, we need a win from within system called Zona. You get it by joining Health Think Global. Number two, we've got to have a rich and abundant business vehicle. You either build your own vehicle or you join one. And you can join one in our incredible world-class compensation plan. And the third thing needed is we need to have optimal health. And we have health products that have clinical studies. I've got doctors, nutritionists. We've created the products that I take in my body each day so I can overcome doubt and I can win from within. And those products are critical. And it's a gut, mind, body sync called the Core 3 Daily System. So when I'm talking about living this rich and abundant life, we need to put things in our body so we physically feel awesome. That's the first reason I built Health Think Global. Number two, a rich and abundant business vehicle. I'm so tired of teaching people how to start their own businesses because I know the learning curve. I know the conversation. I've walked people through their success stories. I know what it's like. I've been a trainer. I've been a coach. I've done that for many years. And I know a faster way to success. And that is you join a business and you get a team and you're all working together for the same thing and you get leverage and you get generational pay, and it's the fastest, most predictable way to wealth, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. And the third reason I built HealthSync Global is because the win from within system is Zona. So we've got the optimal physical health, we've got the rich and abundant business vehicle, and we've got the win from within system. So you ask me, what's one thing, one actionable item is this: dig deeper. And the action step is, I'm going to give you the 6 minutes taste to Zona. I'm going to give you the 6 minute taste to Zona. And you go to healthsyncglobal.com/ME. So M as in Mary, E as in Edward, and it stands for morning empowerment. That's a 30% of Zona, and it'll give you a taste. And what it is, it's a series of questions, and you can start every single day with it and open it up, push play while you're driving, while you're in the shower getting ready or doing your hair. Just listen to Zona, or listen to the morning empowerment, which is part of Zona, and you'll get a little taste of how powerful asking the right questions can be. Listen, we got to believe. We've got to have a way to get into the zone, and this will get you going in the right direction.
And thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Staying in alignment with principles. I don't put myself above the law. Instead, I align to it. The great masters of history did not put themselves above the law. The tyrants did. The tyrants put themselves above the law. The great masters did not. The great masters instead aligned their lives with the law, aligned their lives with principles. So in my personal time, I don't look at pornography. I don't think that's being, my heart is pure towards my wife and my relationship with my wife. Like I live a life that I'm not perfect by any means, but I strive to live by the principles I know, and I don't play mind games justifying my appetites to my logical mind, and instead I keep it about the heart. That's one thing my grandpa said to me. He said, keep it in your heart, not in your head.
Very true. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I got to think about that for a second. I think that what I wish I knew about earlier in life is, I'm going to talk about relationships. I wish I understood more about bond injuries. I think that in our lives, if you study NDEs, those are called near-death experiences. This is when people die, they go to heaven, they have some experience, and they come back and they report, whether they're believers or not. One of the universal things, I read this book recently. It was really interesting about all these experiences people had. But one of the universal things was that a lot of times people would experience the realization that their relationships were the most important thing in life. It wasn't the money, wasn't their possessions, wasn't the accolades, wasn't the recognition or autographs they've given. It was the relationships. And my point is that relationships are very important. So if there's something I wish I knew younger, I wish I would have known that bond injuries are normal. I wish I would have known that as we make mistakes in relationships, it's normal. For goodness sakes, the research shows that even between a mother and an infant, when mom goes and takes a shower and the baby at 9 months is in the crib and doesn't know where mom is, and the baby gets completely a bond injury, literally. They think they're alone in the world. Mom left them alone, and mom comes out of the shower and the baby's almost inconsolable. There's a real bond injury that happened right there. The baby actually felt like mom wasn't there and wasn't going to be there for them. Bond injuries are normal. They're going to happen. Some are intentional. For example, sometimes a husband buys a motorcycle. This isn't me, but this happened with another couple recently. Sometimes a husband buys a motorcycle, doesn't tell the wife, hides it, keeps it a secret, and the neighbor confesses to the wife, and boom, that's a bond injury. Like the husband was lying and he wouldn't tell her, right? That's a full-fledged bond injury. So some are intentional, some are not. what I wish I would have known earlier in life was, one, how to avoid them. And two, more importantly, because we're all going to have them. All of us do. We all have bond injuries, and then we think we're the only ones that do. And then we get into this weird mindset of like, oh, I'm different. We're the only ones that are dealing with this, when in reality, you'd be surprised. So the first thing is I wish I would have known about them. But two, the most important thing, and really answering your question on what I wish I would have known, I wish I would have known how to heal bond injuries, because you can heal them. You can recover. There is hope. It requires a soft heart. It requires an open heart. And sometimes if the other partner isn't open, then we need to stay there and be patient and loving, and patient and loving, and patient and loving for some extended amount of time until their heart softens. You can't force them. You can't say, well, your heart's not soft, so this is over. Well, now you're the one with a hard heart. Sometimes bond injuries mean that it takes us 18 months to heal. So I wish I would have known the secret to the bonds. And I'll just tell you right now what they are. Number one is, underneath all the stories, underneath all the problems that people say there are, whether it's sex, money, I mean, whatever, there's one question that needs to be answered for people to feel bonded. Number one question. There's not any more. There's not any less. If this question is answered, people will feel bonded. If the question is not answered by any degree, by all the different ways it can be answered, then they won't feel bonded. So what's the question? The question is, are you there for me? If we can successfully answer that question in our relationships, and the person feels like we're there for them, we'll have a strong bond. And if we mess up, and for some reason they didn't feel like we were there for them, if we can clean it up quickly and help them feel and see that we are there for them, then we will have a strong bond. The challenge is that question's not always going to be answered. There's a lot of things going on in life. So how do you heal it? Well, if you're writing something down, I'll do this in a visual way so you'll never forget. Write down the question, are you there for me? If there's a couple that says, oh, we're getting a divorce because he spent money and I didn't want him to spend money, the core issue there is, I don't feel like he's there for me if he's going to go spend all the cash, or I felt like he took away our life savings and I was depending on him. The question that it wasn't answered was, are you there for me? I told him not to, and he did, or something like that. Are you there for me was not answered. So write down the question, are you there for me? How do you answer that question? This is what I wish I would have known, because if you know how to answer this question, you'll know how to heal the bonds in our lives. And you see the words, are you there for me? Look at the first word, R, A-R-E. That's an acronym. That acronym are three words, starts with A, the next word is R, and the next word is E. Those three things are going to help us answer the question, are you there for me? This is how you answer the question. A stands for accessible, R stands for responsive, and E stands for engaged. For me to have a bond with my wife, to answer the question, are you there for me? I have to be accessible, responsive, and engaged. Those are the three things that are needed in order for somebody to feel like you're there for them. So if I'm talking, here's a mistake I made. If I'm talking about business and, my wife asked me a question and I'm too focused on a question in my head, which happened last week. And she said, Brandon, I asked you a question and you just totally changed the subject and didn't even hear me. Accessible, responsive, and engaged. I was not responsive, and I wasn't engaged with what she was saying. I was in my own world. And because of that, she felt like I wasn't there for her because she was trying to tell me something. Accessible, responsive, and engaged is how we answer the question, are you there for me? Accessible physically, emotionally, right? Responsive, which means somebody could be mad at you or upset with you and you're accessible. You're like, tell me more. And you don't make it about you. And engaged. You listen. You care. And Rocky, I remember one time my wife and I went to the restaurant, the Olive Garden. And we left the Olive Garden. We were going to go out for a nice hike, a nice walk in nature. And our kids were at home and they were younger at the time, several years ago. And we walked out of the restaurant and we got in the car and I'm like, great, let's go over our favorite trail. We're going to go for a nice walk and see the sunset. She says, Brandon, I want to go home. I said, what? You want to go home? She said, yeah, take me home. I said, why? I'm like, do you know how many girls would love their husbands to take them on a weekly date and you just want to go home? She's like, yeah, take me home. I really want to go home now. I said, this is ridiculous. So I drive her home and she goes inside and I'm sitting outside and, you know, I'm sitting out in my truck. Today I drive a truck. I've driven race cars and all that, but I like an old F-150 Ford. Shouldn't say old. But anyways, I'm sitting in my truck. She goes inside and I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world did it go from blissful to terrible? And I thought, oh my gosh, I did it. And what I did, and there's this, is I made it about me. And if you're going to put something in your notes, write down, don't make it about me. Let me tell you. So I'm sitting there in my truck. I'm like, dang it. I made it about me. When she told me, take me home, I made it about me. I took it personal. I don't know what she wanted. I don't know why she said it because I took it personal. I made it about me. So I walked in the house after about 5 minutes and I said to my wife, hey, can we talk for a second? And we're in the midst of all these little kids. And so we go into our bedroom and we shut the door. And when they're little, they're all banging on the door. Mom, Daddy, right? And I'm like, just give me 2 minutes. Just give me 2 minutes. I just need to talk to you. She said, what? And I said, I'm sorry that when we left the restaurant, you said, I want to go home. And I never even asked you why. I don't even know why. I took it personal. I made it about me. I said, can we try again? She said, sure. I said, okay, you just said, I want to go home. Here's what I should have said. Oh, you want to go home? Why is that, honey? She said, well, I would have said because I want to check on the kids. And maybe I would have said, oh yeah, why do you want to check on the kids? And this is what she said. She said, I have that motherly feeling like we need to stop by the house on our way to the sunset hike. She says, I still wanted to go with you. I just had a feeling that something wasn't right at home and I just wanted to stop by and check on the kids for 5 minutes on the way. And I was like, oh, and I said, I'm so sorry that I couldn't hear you. I was not accessible. I was not responsive and I was not engaged with you because I made it all about me. I made it all about me. And Rocky, you asked me the question, what's something I wish I would have known? I wish I would have known that I just need to answer the questionnaire there for me. I used to think girls were hard to figure out or that relationships were hard to figure out. No, we got to answer the questionnaire there for me. With employees, running teams, businesses, performance bonuses, we got to answer that question too. Are you there for me? And we got to step it up and let people know we got their backs or else they're jumping ship. Same thing with teenagers. Same thing in a marriage. Are you there for me? And if the more we're accessible, responsive, and engaged, we will have a strong bond. These days with my teenager, he doesn't want to talk unless it's 11 o'clock at night when I'm exhausted and want to go to bed. But that's when he wants to talk. That's when he's open. So what do? Every once in a while, I'll drive him down the road. We'll go get him something at the store and we'll have a chance for me to be accessible, responsive, and engaged. But I do it when he's open to it, not when I'm open to it, because I'm going to be accessible, responsive, and engaged when he's available.
Brandon, that is excellent advice. And our last question is, what one piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think the piece of advice that I'd give to my younger self, if I was very young, I would let myself know that you're not alone in life, that there's more going on, that as long as you live a principle-centered life and as long as you step forward believing, things are going to be okay. Things are going to work out. You're not alone and things are going to be okay. There is purpose. There is magic. There is help along the way. And all you've got to do is strive to do your best. You don't have to be perfect. And if you slip, you get back up and you get back up fast. And that's what I tell myself. Because if there's a person that slips, makes mistakes, but they make it right and they make it right fast, or they get back up and they get back up fast, there's nothing that can stop that pattern in life. Because no matter what happens to a person, as long as they have that pattern, if you slip, you get back up fast, you can throw that person into any environment and they'll make it. You can throw them against any challenge, they'll make it. And as an entrepreneur, they're going to come out successful.
We're always going to get knocked down, and we always need to be ready to get right back up. If people would like to find you and connect and learn more, what's the best place for them to do that?
If people want to connect and learn more, go to healthsyncglobal.com and look at what we're doing. Click on the greatness tab. You can learn a little bit about what I'm doing, why I started the HealthSync Global company. And if you're interested in learning more and doing more and making a difference and setting yourself free financially and never looking back and doing something great and having higher contribution in people's lives, if you're interested in being a pillar of strength in people's lives, if you want to be with those who are seeking greatness, then take a look at healthsyncglobal.com and see what we're up to. We're looking for people that are driven, that are not perfect, but they want to have a life of greatness. They want to have a little bit more money, and some people want to have a lot more. And I built the company for people to set themselves free. I've had my success. I built this company for those and for the me that existed when I first got started. I wish I had this opportunity when I got started. I wish I had a win from within system. I wish I had products that could make my physical body just feel amazing each day. And I wish I had a rich and abundant business vehicle so that I didn't have to spend decades figuring the business thing out. And instead, somebody just showed me the ropes. And that's why I built the company.
And we'll put that in the show notes. And I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you very much.
Wow. That was a lot of information. And the wisdom is timeless. What Brandon learned from his grandfather was taught to Brandon's grandfather as a child. I read every day from a manual for living, which is almost 2,000 years old. And I shared one of those quotes at the beginning of this episode. As you start to dig deeper, you see the secrets to living abundantly are all around us. We just need to change the way we view the world. That was this week's action step. Ask the bigger questions and dig deeper into what you want in life. The universe has everything you need for your success, and you just have to look for it and put your energy out there. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode. So please share it with a few friends and leave some feedback. I would appreciate that. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can reach me at rocky@richyoursoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.